The Turkey-Africa Partnership meeting is over, and now the African continent is looking forward to the Antalya Diplomacy Forum that will be held from the 11th to the 13th of April 2025. I had a sit down with Djibouti Foreign Affairs Minister Mahamoud Ali Youssouf. You're watching TRT World One-on-One. I am Brenda Radido. Let's get into it. So Africa has become one of the fundamental pillars of, pillars of a Turkish foreign policy. So how would you evaluate the Turkey-Africa partnership relations, and how can these relations further be deepened?
Let's start by saying that the Africa-Turkey relationship dates back to many centuries. So there is a common denominator with regard to history, cultural exchanges, and on the basis of this very solid ground, I think this partnership is built for a number of perspectives that are quite interesting, at least from the African point of view. That's why in 2008, the Africa partnership, Africa-Turkey partnership started, and we have had so many, exciting moments in the process. Down the road, 3 summits, so many ministerial meetings. And as you have heard yesterday during the 3rd ministerial meeting, all the speakers were speaking about the substance of this partnership. It wasn't just on the paper. And even the chairman of the African Commission said that is an exemplary partnership between Africa and Turkey. Now, this meeting helped us to assess and evaluate the achievements so far, and also project ourselves on the through the plan that you have put together, the 22-26 plan. That plan of action gives us also a roadmap towards the achievement of the remaining, projects and area of interest that we would like to see promoted. That's number one. The second point I would like to really underline is the fact that the role of Turkey on the African continent is growing for a number of reasons. I talked about the historical reasons. I also mentioned the idea, the principle. I said the reasons related to the substance of that partnership, but there is one major one, is the trust that the African countries have on Turkey's role, either for peace and security, mediation processes, and all other sectors of interest. So I'm very, very optimistic about the future of this partnership.
Away from that, so how would you describe the African Union's role in promoting peace and security in the African continent, and how would you define the role of the African standby force in the Africa peace and security architecture?
We have on the continent what we call the African Architecture for Peace and Security, and a number of mechanisms to implement that architecture and the roadmap and the plans we have for peace and security. The strategy to reach, the goal of a peaceful continent is called silencing the guns. We started to work on that strategy since 2016, and then it has been extended to 2030 because there are still a number of hotspots on the continent. So the African Union is working very hard on, transforming this continent by making it more peaceful. And all initiatives coming from, friends and loyal friends like Turkey are welcome. And we think that in order to, make operational this East African standby force, it is one of the mechanisms. It's not the only mechanism for peace and security on the continent. You have the Committee of Elders, you have the Peace and Security Council, we have the Peace Fund, and so on and so forth. So this mechanism is one of them, the East African Standby Force. But there are also for each region a standby force, but they are not operational. So in order to make them operational, we need funding, we need a better readiness for that, political will from member countries to send forces, African forces, to really prevent or resolve crises, internal crises to countries. So there's still, a lot of, work to do. So we are really on the right path to reach that goal. And we hope that by 2030, silencing the gun will become a reality on the ground.
And now let's talk about your candidature for that seat that everyone is talking about within the African continent, the African Union chairperson seat. Do you think Africa is on track in terms of the goals and aspirations of the Union's Agenda 2063?
Yes, I think that the performance or the execution level of our decisions are not that high. We had our first 10-year plan, and then we passed to the second 10-year plan because the Agenda 2063 is built on 5 pillars, 5 10-year plan. And we are going to try to increase or raise the level of execution and performance of the Commission so that all the goals we have set to ourselves be reached, before 2063. This is our, ambition, and we would like really to see, as we say, an integrated, peaceful Africa that is let's say, the best place for African youth, African women, Africans in general to live, instead of, rushing to countries where they think that there is the El Dorado, but actually it is a source of suffering. Becoming refugees, going through very tough times to reach some countries in Europe or elsewhere is not what we wish to our youth. And we need to work hard as decision makers to create the best conditions for our African citizens so that they can remain on the continent, work for the continent, and really make their living here and contribute to the prosperity of the continent.
All right. And the African Union became a permanent member of the G20 as of September 2023. How can it amplify its influence in the G20 and contribute meaningful to the international system? And also, as you're responding to this question, maybe you can also touch on the Turkey Foreign Affairs Minister, yesterday when he said that, what, African continent, don't worry, we have your back.
Yes. One of the flagship programs on the Agenda 2063 is to promote the role of the African continent on the international arena. Now we managed to get a seat, in the G20. That's not enough. All the decisions made globally are made by others than Africans. Our objectives is to get a seat, a permanent 2 seats in the Security Council with the right of veto. We need to have a more equitable representation at the World Bank board, the IMF board. We need to see the African continent be around the table of global decisions. We don't want to be each and every time on the menu. That's what we always say. So it's very important for the coming, chairman of the commission, with the new commission, to work very hard to give Africa the rightful place it deserves in these, fora throughout the world. That's my ambition. That's also one of the top priority I will try to shoulder if I am elected. As far as the campaign and the election to that post, I didn't respond to the question. Everything is going well. I have very good feedback from many countries on the African continent. So I'm really very optimistic.
All right. And, the irregular migration continues to hamper stability in Northern Africa. So when I mentioned Turkey, what do you think Turkey, how can Turkey and Africa increase their cooperation on this front to bolster regional stability and increase prospect for prosperity?
Migration is a phenomenon that is not only proper to the African continent. You have migration from everywhere in the world. I think we need to make a nexus between climate change, migration, political crisis, and migration. But there is also a third track, which is a natural movement of population. I mean, the African continent has 1,400,000,000 inhabitants. And by 2050, I think the population will reach 2.5 billion inhabitants. So you see, we can feed all this population on the continent, but the natural movement of population is something that is, deeply linked to the culture and habits of the human being. If you look at the Turkish population, only the Turkish population, just to give you an example, because we're talking about Turkey. Yeah. Almost many of the groups living there came from elsewhere from Turkey. It's the same for each country. So I think that this process of migration has to be orderly migration, done in the best way possible, and not a migration that is, chaotic and create more problems to the recipient or countries. But our objective on the continent is to avoid, such migration that create more suffering to our population. So we need really to create the conditions for our citizens to stay on the continent, because we have the resources, we have the land, we have everything. We need to improve, the governance, so that we can create wealth and job for our youngsters.
And I mean also Turkey coming in to say that we are going to develop Africa together with the leadership of the African countries. And lastly, as we wind up this conversation, I'd like to pick your mind on the Antalya Diplomacy Forum that is expected to happen next year in April from the 11th to the 13th. What are you looking forward to?
I think the Antalya Diplomacy Forum is a very interesting platform. Thanks to the role of Turkey, the diplomatic role of Turkey, and Turkey's capacity to create that sense of coherence between different nations. So I think this forum really is critical in terms of developing new ideas coming from all horizons on the continent, the African continent, and even through in Europe and the world. Let's not forget that Turkey is, let's say, the bridge between Europe and Asia, and today Turkey is extending its arm and its legs to Africa.
Mahamoud Ali Youssouf, Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation of Djibouti, thank you for talking to TRT World One-on-One.
Thank you very much.